Hello and welcome to Legal Action. Sponsored by the DuPage County Bar Association, we present these programs quarterly for our public so that we might inform all of our viewers on their rights and obligations under the law. My name is Susan Alvarado and I am happy to be here today to discuss the very important topic of teenagers and alcohol, specifically teenagers and drunk driving. We have with us today three very prominent panelists from the DuPage County area. First of all, we have Dr. Jeffrey Manassa, who is a psychologist practicing here in Naperville, Illinois. Dr. Manassa will speak to us about some of the signs that we as parents perhaps should be looking for if we have teenagers who are just about to start driving, and some of the signs that we as parents might miss. I'd also like to introduce to my left attorney Fred Spitzeri. Fred practices law also here in Naperville in DuPage County and has a great deal of expertise in the area of education, school law, and the way that a drunk driving arrest might impact our children in school and in their careers, their future career choices. And finally, I'd like to welcome attorney Donald Ramsell, who is one of Illinois' leading attorneys in the area of criminal law and drunk driving and the law. And Don will speak to us today about, again, some of the impact that our children might experience if they are around alcohol, and some of the legal ramifications that might occur if we find ourselves in that situation. So I'd like to start today, if we could, by speaking to Dr. Manassa. Dr. Manassa, can you tell us a little bit about your background as it pertains to teenagers or adolescents and addictions or alcohol problems?
I'm a licensed psychologist. I've been working in Naperville for almost 20 years and have a practice that predominantly is adolescent families. I have a specialty in terms of addictions and chemical dependency. I'm a diplomate in the American Academy of Psychologists Treating Addictions. So I have a bit of a background in this area. I've worked for years with families and adolescents, and very often with adolescents in the context of their families, to address an array of different issues, specifically with regards to DUIs or to driving and drinking at the same time. There are a number of different issues that come up, and one of the first things to keep in mind is that it's always better to be proactive rather than reactive in terms of, if you can deal with your children ahead of time in terms of awareness of what's going on, opening up of communications, letting them be aware of what may lie ahead for them. You've always got a leg up even when problems do occur down the road.
Could you give us an idea, Dr. Manassa, about what might be the best way as a parent to approach that? At what age do you think it might be appropriate to start talking to our children about alcohol and the other influences that they might experience?
Kids are talking about these things at a very early age. So if we start at 15 or 16, when we are concerned about them driving, we've most likely not been the first to talk with them. The schools, whether it's through a DARE program, start in the elementary schools. However, kids are exposed from early on to alcohol use, in particular within family settings, and that they have an awareness of social usage, problematic usage, dependency, and so forth, that education they have, they're observing it already. So to not talk about it is to add to the denial of problems that may exist there.
Very interesting. So you're saying perhaps then that we should include our children in these conversations from a relatively early age then, and start telling them about right and wrong usages of alcohol?
Well, getting away from right or wrong, but to differentiate between different patterns. Mm-hmm. We're not going to say that it's okay for a 13-year-old or a 16-year-old to be drinking at all. However, to differentiate in terms of styles of usage and so that, for instance, when they go off to college, that the only usage they know of is binge usage in college and so forth, and that they can't differentiate. All you have to do is go out socially, and you can see people in an array of different contexts and the different styles of drinking. Kids see it. They're not stupid. They're not blind. They're observing it. We need to be aware of it and not to deny that these things are happening in front of them, whether it's at a family occasion or whatever. Very
interesting. How about, as a parent, I've always wondered if there isn't something that I might be able to do to ward off a drinking and driving issue. And I understand that you've just said that certainly talking to them about the differentiation of the different types of alcohol usages from an early age might be good. But are there any specific signs that you can think of that we parents of adolescents might look for that might signal a potential problem in a kid?
Impulsivity, poor judgment. How are they making decisions in other areas? Are they mature enough to handle what we're giving them? We're handing them keys to a car at the age of 16. Are they mature enough to make the decisions around that car? If you're in a fairly affluent community and a suburban community, the reliance on automobiles is great. And we assume many things which are not necessarily the case. We assume our children are responsible behind the cars, and we can only legislate or mandate, for instance, only one other child in the car with them at a time for, I think it's now 6 months, the first 6 months of driving. Right. I'm going to defer to the experts here when it comes to this, not myself. There are other differentiations. They have to drive for 50 hours before they are getting a license at this point. I've said to kids on many occasions, when you have driven 200,000 miles, then tell me you're a good driver. Not after you've had your license for 3 months and you can manage your car, but you have no concept of anything else that's happening on the road. And when you add alcohol to the mix, then all of a sudden you're even worsening one's judgment and one's awareness and one's faculties. And so it's a recipe for disaster.
Right, right. So really then, as parents, we should be trying to be objective, at least, as to the maturity level of our children, yes? And if
yes.
they're even mature enough to be ready to drive a car, correct?
Correct.
And their friends and colleagues must also play a role, don't you? Wouldn't
Absolutely.
you say?
Absolutely.
Yes, that's what I've always found too, at least in my personal life. I'd like to turn now to Attorney Fred Spitzeri, if I could. Fred, can you tell our viewers a little bit about your background and some of the experience that you've had with our adolescents and teenagers and the impact on their schooling or their future education as a result of alcohol or driving while intoxicated?
Sure. I have been in practice for 22 years and am officing here in Naperville. But before I became an attorney, I worked for a school district, so naturally I always had an interest in the schools and education. And I recently had a number of cases involving students and improper use of alcohol. And one of the problems is we have zero tolerance policies now, which people need to be aware of. Zero tolerance policies came about first in or around 1994. Congress passed what they call the Gun-Free Schools Act.
Fred, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I find this zero tolerance policy very, very interesting and extremely important, and I want to discuss it at length. I'd like to take a break for a moment and come back and talk further about the zero tolerance policies that we have in many of our schools. So if we could just take a short break, we hope you'll stay with us and come back and talk with us some more about the important topic of teenage